What's happening, cat daddies and foxy mamas? It's the Blaxploitation fanatic back with another episode of the Blaxploitation Appreciation Podcast, where we celebrate Blaxploitation culture from movies, to music, to books, and everything in between. So let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. And our movie for this week is a true celebration of Blaxploitation culture. It's a little-known film from 1974 called Solomon King. It was also known as Black Agent Lucky King. I'm not sure if that was up on a re-release or what, but in doing research, I found that it was also known as that by that title as well. But the reason this is a true celebration of Blaxploitation culture is because this is an independent film that the main character is a gentleman named Sal Watts, and Sal he wrote, produced, and directed as well as starred in this. So this is a true celebration and spirit of the independent hustle. Like a lot of people, when we talk about the Blaxploitation era, some people say it was Black actors and Black culture being exploited by white people and making Black actors look bad and things like that. I don't consider it that way. A lot of the Blaxploitation films were produced by people of their own, Rudy Ray Moore, Jamal Fanaka, and several others. Fred Williamson opened his own production company. So Blaxploitation, there was a lot of Black folk who made money, did things that should be celebrated in the genre, and this is definitely one of them. Now, granted, the movie in there subpar because he used non-professional actors, but just the fact, again, the grind that went into him putting up his money and producing, writing, and directing this. So I think this is an awesome film. And just for that reason alone, I love this film, Solomon King. It was considered lost for many, many years. It was just recently restored by a company called Deaf Crocodile Films. Shout out to those guys for restoring a print that they received or that they were able to get from UCLA Film and TV Archive. And then shout out to, I know it's out there on YouTube as well, but shout out to Tubi for making this free as well, because I saw it on YouTube maybe about several months ago, and then recently saw it again on Tubi. So shout out to both for making it available for people to find this little known gem. Now, what it's about is Solomon King is an ex-CIA agent who seeks revenge after his girlfriend, a princess of this unnamed Middle Eastern country, is killed. So who do you have in this movie? Well, like I said, you got this guy right here, Sal Watts. He wrote, produced, directed, and starred in the film. So he plays Solomon King. And when I look at Sal, and when you look at him, he looks like he could be D'Urville Martin's brother. Like, he looks so much like D'Urville Martin to me. Also in the movie was a gentleman by the name of, Scott's name is Little Jamie Watts. Now, when you look at him, he's nowhere little at all. He's Sal's real life brother. And in the movie, he plays Solomon King's brother, Manny King. So that was the main two characters that we really were, who kind of carried the movie. Now, all the other people, like I said, were non-professional actors, probably really wouldn't know them, but there were two people in there that you would maybe know. And the first one is Tanya Boyd, the lovely Tanya Boyd, who did two other Blaxploitation movies. She did Black Heat with Timothy Brown and Black Shampoo with John Daniels. But the funny thing about it is, as beautiful and as lovely as Tanya Boyd is, she was uncredited. Her role she isn't even mentioned in the credits. So I don't know if, she didn't want her name attached to the movie or what. But who knows? And then weirdly enough, or oddly enough, wherever you want to say it, is this guy, baseball player Tito Fuentes, was also in the movie, guest starring as himself. His role had no bearing in the plot of the movie at all. I think it was just a way to say he was in there, maybe use that as star power to draw people in. But I did do a little bit more research, and it turns out, I guess Tito was a friend of Sal's, and that's how, maybe he got in the movie as well. So if I had to give you an overview of the movie in and of itself, excuse me, like I said, it starts off, there's this prince in this unnamed Middle Eastern country saying that, he wants to take over. So he's got to kill the king, which is his uncle, and his cousin, which is the princess. So then the king and the princess are at this oil field checking out, talking about the oil reserves with Solomon's brother Manny, still over in this unnamed Middle Eastern country when they're ambushed. They start getting shot at, but they get away. Manny and the princess escape to the US, and the prince, the guy who wants to take over, he has like a CIA agent on the take. So he calls them and says, hey, take out Solomon King and kill the princess. So they try to take Solomon out, fail at that. But they do hire a hitman to kill the princess. And, that's really what sets Solomon off. So once the princess is killed, Solomon and Manny, let's go back to get Tito off of there, go back to Solomon. Solomon and Manny, they track down the hitman and kill him. And then ultimately where it ends is Solomon and his entire crew head over to that Middle Eastern country and wind up killing the prince. So that's the movie in a nutshell. But again, the it's again, you gotta take the acting for what it is. But just when you look at the visuals in the movie, and me, remember, I'm all about aesthetics. It was shot in Oakland, and it just represents its beautiful 70s. It's the scenery, the shots, and everything. It's just a fun time talking that you see, and it represents that era. Now, about Sal himself, Sal Watts, he was a businessman in Oakland. And what I found out is that he owned record labels, he owned a record store, a nightclub. And then, depending on, I don't know if I couldn't find this substantiated, but in a couple of places, say he owned restaurants as well. So, dude was a true entrepreneur doing his thing. And his clothing store, he had a couple of clothing stores called Mr. Sal's Fashions. His clothing store supplied the wardrobe for the movie for the men. So that was pretty cool. I thought, utilizing his own resources. Like I said, it was shot in Oakland in the Bay Area. You could see a lot of the scenery there. He used people from the community and their non-professional actors. And one of the things I really love about it is he also used several of his family members in the movie, like his sons, his wife's in at the end. Not big roles, but just the fact that, he let everybody eat off his movie, basically. So I thought that was pretty cool. So this is one that it's a hard to find if you wanted to own a copy. I don't know if they're selling DVDs or anything, but again, you could catch it on Tubi on streaming. You could catch it on YouTube. So definitely check this out. Now, I only grabbed one scene from this movie because it's just a scene that this is representative of what you would see throughout. This is a scene where what happens is Sal's brother, or Solomon's brother and uncle, are kind of waiting for him in a car, and they get ambushed by some guys, and it turns into this fight scene. So check this out. It's kind of funny.
Out the car. Hey, Uncle John, just do like they say. It'll be all right.
Cut the fucking talking and get out of the goddamn car.
It's hilarious because you could see that was his uncle that was beating the guy. He's like moving his head as he's swinging to, make sure he doesn't hit him. And then when Manny was chasing the one guy, he like tried kicking him and missed, and Solomon's kick. So it's just, obviously bad acting. But again, when I look at this movie, man, you could sense in this movie they had fun shooting this movie, and that made me enjoy it even more. So I strongly encourage you, if you can, if you have the opportunity, go check it out, man. Solomon King, pretty cool. All right. So then let's go ahead and shift over to our book for this week. And our book is a book called Poor Daughter by Charlie Avery Harris. And this book it's a story about the life of a female trick baby and how she grew up to become a top-notch whore herself until her untimely demise. That's the story in and of itself. But before I give you more about Charlie Avery Harris and everything, I want to give a shout out to or viewer, excuse me, shout out to viewer Bobby Wobby 13 for pointing me back to Charlie Avery Harris, because I had read a few Charlie Avery Harris books, but then I kind of Charlie Avery Harris wrote 6 novels. I've read 3 of them. This makes number 4. So I had gotten away from it, but Bobby Bobby 13 said, "Hey, I'd love to see you do something on Charlie Avery Harris." So shout out, thanks for nudging me and bringing me back to Charlie Avery Harris. Now, Charlie Avery Harris, he looked up to Donald Goines as a mentor. This is that's another one of the covers for it, and he looked up to Donald Goines as a mentor, and you can see this as evidence in the how he patterned his book titles. Like I said, he wrote 6 books, and 3 of his book titles were almost like mirror image title wise of Donald Goines, like Whore Daughter. Donald Goines wrote a book called Whoreson, and Whore Daughter, kind of, and not only is the title similar, but the stories kind of parallel a little bit as well. Charlie Avery Harris wrote a book called Mac and Gangster. Donald Goines wrote Black Gangster. And then Charlie Avery Harris wrote Raw Players. Donald Goines wrote Street Players. And it's interesting that Street Players, Raw Players similarity, that's really what kicked off my whole Blaxploitation paperbacks phenomenon, because I knew Donald Goines wrote 16 novels, and one of my still on my bucket list, I kind of slacked off, is to read all 16 Donald Goines novels. And so in doing that, I was kind of trying to get the names of all of them. And I was on Wikipedia at the time and saw it said Donald Goines wrote a book called Brawl Players. And I was like, I don't remember Donald Goines writing anything called Brawl Players. And so that's when I did a little more research and found that Brawl Players was written by Charlie Avery Harris. And that just took me down this whole rabbit hole. And that's how I got into the whole Blaxploitation and paperbacks situation. So shout out to everybody. And, the thing about Charlie Avery Harris books is he considered Donald Goines his mentor. But one of the things I'll say about Charlie Avery Harris is like his writing, his dialogue better than Goines. He's a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just a little more gritty in terms of his dialogue and things of that nature. And the book itself, his books are very hard to find. And like Whore Daughter, this in finding a first edition is probably almost impossible. Like this is, I think, the 3rd cover. That is the 2nd cover there. The first one, I couldn't even find images. I have a tiny image out on the web somewhere, but even if you're trying to track the book down, I was doing a little bit of research on bookfinder.com. So it almost seems like you'll be paying at least $1,000 if you come across a copy of this. And I think all of Charlie Avery Harris's novels are pretty hard to find. So, but the thing again, if you read his books, they're gritty, they're raw. And somebody that did a review of Whore Daughter kind of summed it up in terms of Charlie Avery Harris's writing compared to Donald Goines. Because I was like, one of the things about when I read Charlie Avery Harris novels, it's like, man, this stuff is just gritty. But they summed it up perfectly. And the way they said it is, Goines's books are rough and unsparing, but also sensitive and empathic. Harris has the first 2, but not so much the second. And I would totally agree with that, because Charlie Avery Harris's characters, they are not sensitive and have no empathy whatsoever. It's just hardcore. So, and one of the interesting facts is one of the main characters in all the novels the first 2 I read were Mac and Gangster and Brawl Players. And the main character in there is a Mac called Junius. And Junius, that's his name. And he winds up showing up in the other novels I read, Con Man, which was a totally different story. It had nothing to do with Junius, but he popped up in there at some point. And then Whore Daughter, this particular book here, he shows up in there. He plays a little bit of not a huge role. Well, I guess you could say he has a huge role in this novel. But I was always wondering about, why is this guy, Junius, always showing up in Charlie Avery Harris's novels? Well, the funny thing is, doing a little more research, that's Charlie Avery Harris right there. Cool, brother. His real name is Junius Ellis Avery. I think that's, yeah, Junius Ellis Avery. So the Junius character, I guess, is a little bit of him in there. And when you look at him, he kind of looks like a broad player, Mac type of deal. So I was wondering, I'm like, oh, that's why Junius always pops up, because Charlie's, putting himself, injecting himself into the story. But definitely it is his book, Horror Daughter, and any other Charlie Avery Harris book is definitely something you want to read. I still have two to go. I got Fast Track and Black and Deadly. But Charlie Avery Harris, if you like Donald Goines, I actually, when I think of it this way, if you think of Donald Goines as the king of Blaxploitation paperbacks, Charlie Avery Harris would be the prince. Now, some people may say, well, what about Iceberg Slim? Iceberg Slim is the godfather. So, got Iceberg Slim as the godfather, Donald Goines as the king, and Charlie Avery Harris will probably be the prince, my opinion. All right. So, that is, again, the book, Horror Daughter. All right. So before we switch over to the music, just want to once again give a shout out to our sponsor for this week. I mentioned number 4, my man Vantana, for the big fellas. So you can go check out his eBay store where he sells for big dudes, XL up to 4XL. He's got hoodies, sneakers, t-shirts, things like that, and kind of geared in the hip hop vein and the Blaxploitation vein. And then if you're not a big guy, if you're like me, he also just has books, CDs, old school vinyl and cassettes, hip hop and Blaxploitation type of stuff as well. So check him out. You can peep him at, you can go to eBay and the store is Vantana 11 right there. Yeah. Or you can scan that QR code right there. Scan that QR code and it should take you to his store also. All right. So then if we shift to our music, now this is the first time in a while that the music for the episode is the soundtrack to the movie. But because I love Solomon King so much, I wanted to give a shout out to the soundtrack as well. And the funny thing is, this soundtrack was, well, not funny, I guess it's awesome. This soundtrack was released on 2 different record labels, was released on Salwa Records. And if you make the connection, Sal Watts, it was Sal's record label. And it was also released on Sippi Records. I don't know if he owned that or if it had a distribution deal, I'm not sure. But the soundtrack only had 6 songs originally, but upon restoration, they and I don't know if Death Crocodile did the restoration of the soundtrack or re-release of the soundtrack or not, but it was re-released in 2026 and they added 6 additional cuts, which is cool because the several other cuts that were not on the original soundtrack. So the original soundtrack, like I said, only had 6 songs on there. Several of the songs that were not on the original soundtrack, they were in the movie, but I'm not sure why they weren't on the soundtrack, but they were the better ones. And there's the funky cut called Sister Sheila. See if we can check out a little bit of that one. So that's Sister Sheila, and that's the character that Tanya Boyd played, the uncredited character that Tanya Boyd played. And then there's a slow song called There's No Such Thing as a Little Bit of Me. And then there's this theme from King. And that one is what you heard during that fight scene when I showed you the fight scene. That was playing during that time. So the soundtrack, and I'm glad they restored it because, like I said, I watched this movie twice. When I saw it several months ago, I don't know if they hadn't found those songs or not, but they kind of put just kind of filler music in there. And it was funny because there was one particular scene where Like I remember at the very beginning of the movie when I watched it the first time, it sounded more like 80s R&B. And I was like, this doesn't seem like a Blaxploitation song that would go with this movie. And I kind of knew that wasn't the original soundtrack when probably midway through the movie there was a scene and they were playing Still DRE by Dr. Dre. I was like, what the heck? How are they gonna put this song in a Blaxploitation movie? I love the Still DRE, don't get me wrong. It just didn't go. But then when I rewatched it on Tubi recently, they have the original songs from the movie. And it just again, it just gives it the pop, man. It just makes it awesome. So I the movie's great. I think the soundtrack is great as well. All right. So then, what we've started doing last episode, I said if I always wanted to be the star of my own Blaxploitation movie or Blaxploitation book, so I did that site blaxploitme.com, and I told people, hey, if you do your own Blaxploitation movie poster or book and you want it featured on the show, come send it to me. And my man Chris Rubio, you all may remember me mentioning Chris as the guy who put me up on a lot of Holloway House stuff. Chris went out and did his movie poster. It's just hilarious. He just the movie poster titled it The Hunky. Chris with the afro. So I thought that was pretty awesome. So if you guys want to go out there and be, the star of your own Blaxploitation book or movie cover or movie Blaxploitation book or movie and do your own Blaxploitation movie poster or book cover, go check out blaxploitme.com. All you got to do is upload a headshot, put in a couple of details. You can do the title of your book, who the characters are going to be in your movie, so forth and so on. And if you want, me to put it on the show, just send it to me. You can email it to me at admin@blaxploitationpaperbacks.com and we'll get it up. All right. So that's going to bring us to the end of this particular episode, Foxy Mamas and Cat Daddies. Let's wrap it up with, like I said, the movie, little known, independent, but definitely Blaxploitation greatness, and that is Solomon King. Our book, hard to find, but if you could track it down, Or Daughter by Charlie Avery Harris. And if you want to see more Blaxploitation paperbacks, just check out my website, blaxploitationpaperbacks.com. And then lastly, the soundtrack to Solomon King as well. Oh, and I'll mention this. The soundtrack originally only had 6 cuts. They re-released it with 12. I'm going to put a link to the playlist in to the playlist on YouTube where you can hear all 12 songs. So that'll be in the show notes. Okay. So as always, appreciate you. Love you, Foxy Mamas and Cat Daddies. I will catch you on the flip side. All right. Peace.